60 to 70% of every dollar that a consumer spends in tax and provincial markups. It doesn't leave a lot for the farmer, for the processor, and the retailer to split that other 30%.
So
right?
you're
And
telling me you only get 40% high off the product then, right? Because there's only 40% left. That would be a good reel on Instagram. Where does the other 60% high go? It goes to the government.
It's an interesting situation that we have, because really the gatekeeper is the provincial government. All right, everyone, welcome back to the Side Hustle podcast. And today we've got a special guest, Paul Pederson. Pederson is a Vancouver-based entrepreneur. He's got over 10 years of experience in Canada's regulated cannabis industry and is the founder and former CEO of Nextleaf, one of Canada's leading manufacturers of cannabis extracts, and founder of Blue Nose Labs, and the first cannabis producer in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia. So we're here to talk about all your ventures, and your company now, Oils, is on a publicly traded company. So congratulations for going public, and looking forward to diving into this new regulated cannabis industry, the good, bad, and the ugly of it, I guess. Thanks for having me. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So 10 years, you're kind of one of the OGs in the space. And it said here in Cape Breton, where are you from originally? Born and raised in Langley, BC, but ended up going to school in Nova Scotia. And, when legalization was only a few weeks away, we had found an abandoned pharmaceutical manufacturing plant in Cape Breton, and our family picked it up out of bankruptcy and brought it back to life as a cannabis processor manufacturer. So, it's been an interesting journey these last few years.
Did you go to St. Mary's?
I did go to St. Mary's. Yeah. Yeah.
Were you there when Chris Flynn was playing football?
No, I was there after Chris Flynn, but when I was there, the guys won 2 Vaniers back to back. So they had quite a run, and obviously Chris has been pretty involved in the community out there.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I got to cross paths with him in high school football. They were too strong for the Quebec League, and they moved them over to the Ontario League, and they didn't lose a game there either, under his tutelage. So it's great to win in business also.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, so growing up there and from Langley, Quinton and I are both familiar with Langley. It's just a stone's throw from here in Vancouver. So how did you get into the industry going through university? I'm sure you had aspirations to get into business. Did you always have an entrepreneurial streak?
I would say yes. I was really exposed to entrepreneurship through a professor at St. Mary's, Dr. Ellen Farrell, and I started a calendar business in an entrepreneurship class, and then I ended up taking that company public in the United States. And that was kind of my first foray into capital markets. And we were acquired by a company, technology company, through a reverse merger. And they merged into our calendar business and got public. And it was sort of the beginning of, really what's been in a kind of an 18-year career of capital markets. And really, I guess 10 years ago, when the Canadian government legalized the commercial production of medical cannabis, that's really when I jumped in, went all in on cannabis. And I think, growing up, son of a dairy farmer out in Langley, cannabis was always around. I wasn't bold enough to get into the industry, and sort of, before legalization, but obviously
just a disclaimer, it was a dairy farm, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But the last 10 years has been really interesting transition from this medical program, and then obviously 2018 to full adult use or recreational. And sort of, I think the biggest takeaway has been the regulation, taxation, and sort of the role that the government has played or plays in the regulated cannabis industry. So, a lot of hard lessons and blood, sweat, and tears, but we're certainly pretty proud of the companies that we've been able to stand up and build and create value for consumers here in Canada.
Yeah, the old SWOT analysis always pulls up the government, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. The government's always there under the threats. even in our industry, because we could have our insurance license revoked in 2 seconds, we're out of business. Have our e-file license or rep ID license revoked, we're out of business. It's like an Uber driver losing their driver's license. You know, you got to revert to a scooter. Now you got to downsize. Now you got to change your whole game plan. So how big a role has the government played along this whole journey? I'm sure it's pivotal, but any major hurdles from the government? I mean, not just for you, for others in the industry.
Absolutely massive. The hurdles are like nothing I've ever seen in business in 20 years. In the sense that in cannabis, if you're producing cannabis, you got to get your production facility, built before you get it licensed. And, companies literally spend years paying rent or paying a staff to sit around, not into production, waiting until the, government gives the all clear on the application. There's a lot of paperwork, there's a lot of waiting, there's a lot of different levels of government that are doing kind of the same thing. And, I was the CEO. When you're an executive, you got to get a security clearance. It was a 2.5 year process, for me to get that security clearance. And, I think,
We'll talk about that offline, right? We'll talk about that offline.
The whole program is, very over designed, right? Over regulated and overtaxed, but the strong survive, and those who are resilient are able to kind of run lean enough. And I think a lot of companies, ours included, you learn a lot of lessons. And I think part of that was that no one's ever done what Canada's done before. Literally, we're the first country in the world, first developed country to legalize and regulate cannabis. And there's a lot of stigma attached to the plant. So I think, there's some kind of excuses on really why it was over-regulated. But now really, I think it's all about survival. Now we're almost 6 years into legalization. 90% of companies are not making money. 90% of cannabis producers are not profitable.
Because of the regulation, it's over-regulated.
I mean, look, that's not the only reason. I mean, some of these companies were never going to be profitable to begin with because they were, stock market promotions. They were run by CEOs that are cowboys that, they didn't do their competitive intelligence. They didn't look at the market and say, hey, where's our
market?
business? Yeah, exactly. I mean, there was a lot of folks that sort of jumped into it. And there's been a reckoning, right? There's cannabis producers in Canada are the largest group of companies that went CCAA in the last couple of years. And, you've sort of seen that. But, certainly, taxation, let's be honest, plays a huge role in it. And cannabis has excise tax that's about 6 times what alcohol's excise tax rate is. And so, when the government is taking 60 to 70% of every dollar that a consumer spends in tax and provincial markups, it doesn't leave a lot for the farmer, for the processor, and the retailer to split that other 30%.
So right? You're telling me you only get 40% high off the product then, right? Because there's only 40% left. That would be a good reel on Instagram. Yeah, where does the other 60% high go? It goes to the government.
It's an interesting situation that we have because really the gatekeeper is the provincial government. They're the ones, I always say, you're selling weed to the government, really, because before the stores can bring your product in or a consumer can buy it, the government buyer has to decide that they're going to bring your brand and your product in. And, the government negotiates hard. They want higher THC at a lower price, right? And that's what's really driving the, price compression. And, really the market's all about, high THC for a low price.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say, make an analogy to the pharmaceutical and the alcohol industry where the government gets involved and they start squeezing as much as they can out of, the end consumer before it gets there.
Yep. And that's exactly it. And, I think part of it's a make work project, right? There's been these massive government bureaucracies that have been built in every province, right? You already had a big federal program, thousands of employees at Health Canada that regulate in this industry. Every gram is tracked from the supply chain from seed to sale, but still every province said, hey, wait, we got to create our own.
Do they have barcodes on the leaf yet? No, I'm joking, but it's almost that bad.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is. Every plant does have its own barcode. You go all the way through and, everything's tracked. And, I think it's great to have a regulated system, but my biggest takeaway, I think, from the last 10 years is, it's all about, you know, an industry needs reasonable taxation and regulation to survive and to thrive. And, you know, right now, you know, this isn't a sustainable industry when 90% of companies aren't making money. And that's, you know, there's been a massive inflow of capital, right? It's kind
But then you have the underground industry you're competing with as well, right?
and they don't have any tax, right? They don't have any regular, you know,
No
cost.
regulation, no tax.
And that's, you know, that is a big challenge. You know, I think if you look at like cigarettes, about half of every cigarette.
I know a dairy farm out in Langley where we can go get some, you know, it's, I'm joking there, but you know, pretty much every SkyTrain station here in the lower mainland, Vancouver, every corner downtown, you can ask somebody, you know, where to get it on the street, and it cuts those that are trying to do things by the book, like you and, you know, all your competitors, to, you know, fully regulated, fully compliant, following all the rules, and you can't make a living. What do they expect?
Well, and it's, you know, I think certainly, you know, lots of issues, and, you know, you still have municipalities like Surrey, where 6 years into legalization, there still isn't one store in Surrey, retail store, nowhere legally you can buy it, because the city of Surrey said, we want to keep these cannabis retailers out. So, I mean, obviously, you know, that's been great news for the illicit market. And, you know, I think that's, you know, part of the challenge is, you know, it takes time for the industry to sort of like work through the stigma that you're dealing with, you know, at different levels of government and municipal government, especially some of these areas where there's been, you know, no stores, or they've been really slow to bring those in. But, you know, the industry is headed in the right direction. You know, every month, you know, the sales continue to build. You know, lots of great research to show that people are drinking less, using less opioids, less tobacco, and you know, substituting cannabis. And, you know, I think you know, globally, you know, Canada sort of going first. We're optimistic in the global market, and, you know, while our domestic market at home is overtaxed, the global market and the ability that Canadian producers have to export cannabis to places like Germany, Australia, Israel, and Poland, I think is very.
Well, we're giving our oil away for free. Why don't we open up the market to cannabis?
For sure. But I think, you know, it's every industry you want to be a global leader, right? I think that's you know, really that's the goal. And, you know, for us, you know, Canada has a lot of experience, obviously starting with medical cannabis. And that's really what these countries like Australia and Germany, you know, that's where the market is. It's on the medical side. And that's you know, giving Canadian companies a great opportunity to build their business internationally.
Yeah, that's at the 40,000 foot high level, no pun intended, right? But you know, that's on the corporate side, right? Public company talking about the government issues. What about for our listeners that just want to support you and your stores? Like, where does somebody go to get, for example, for medical use prescription? How do they get, you know, come into one of your stores? How do they support Paul and what you guys are doing? Or, you know, if they want to use it for pleasure? How does somebody get to one of your stores? Can they order online now? Is that legal, etc.?
Yeah. So in BC, all the online orderings through the BC government, BC Cannabis, and our brands, Glacial Gold, so the #1 selling brand of soft gels in British Columbia, #1 selling CBD oils. So, you know, very excited about that, and available through retailers in the province. And
we'll get those links in the chat below. If Quinton doesn't already have them, let's get them, and you know, make sure everybody can click on a link and support you guys.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. It was really surprising, Rob. I didn't mention this to you, but I ran into Cobb. Remember Cobb from the comedy class?
Yeah.
So we were chatting about it, and he's involved in the industry now, and he was saying how unprofitable all these shops are that he's, I guess, wholesaling to. And I was like, that's so interesting, because my first thought is like, oh, cannabis, that's just like, you know, printing cash. And then I met Paul at the event the other day, and kind of was interested to kind of learn more about it. But yeah, like taxation is the biggest thing that's the government wanted to or legalize it so they can monetize on it. It seems like it was the main motivation there, right? But
the government wants to get involved in anything they can scrape a buck off. They don't generate any revenue doing anything. They don't contribute to the economy. They do not contribute to producing services or products for a fee. They just get in the way of everybody. And we see it on the accounting side. We work with lots of different industries, you know, the real estate industry. they got involved. They wouldn't let realtors incorporate. The mortgage industry, we're working with one of the major software developers in Canada, Finastra, and they're going through all kinds of regulatory problems with FinTrack and money laundering. And they can't just, you can't just get up and make a living anymore without having the government hanging over your shoulder or in your back pocket. That's just my sight on it. And your industry, Paul, is even worse. I can just imagine.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, few reasons for that, but cannabis is treated like it's plutonium. It's a plant, and you know, thankfully, what we've learned over the last 5.5 years, it's a plant that certainly doesn't have the harm profile that many of the naysayers, I think, predicted when Canada legalized. Right? You know, we still haven't seen an uptake in impaired driving. We haven't seen an uptake in teen drug use, right? You know, the reality is that, you know, there has been no deaths. There's been no health emergencies that I think, you know, folks maybe expected. And, you know, really.
Well, what's the worst that can happen? I heard the jokes all around, you know, you end up driving slower and contributing to the economy through Wendy's and McDonald's, you know, just like it's a real, you know, I don't use marijuana. I don't have anything whatsoever against it. You know, I think it's a great industry. You know, I know lots of people that get high and they have fun, and nobody's ever violent like they do when they're drinking alcohol or on other drugs. You know, I support the industry 150%. And it's guys like you that have weathered the storm. And you can tell just hearing you talk, you know, you're passionate and you're fluent about what you're talking about because you're living it day in, day out. So so Glacial Gold is a brand, right? So the company though, so Glacial Gold, let's get it out there. Let's get the word out. Let people know that it's, you know, if you want to get involved and support the industry, that's the way to do it. But how can you know, leverage our listeners? We get about 25,000 members on our newsletter, et cetera. They get links to the podcast. You know, how can they not support by buying, but let's say support by lobbying, helping lobby the government? I'm sure you have your nose into all those areas.
I drove across the country from Vancouver to Ottawa for the 5-year anniversary. Our industry held an event in Ottawa called Grass on the Hill, and you know, really the focus was meeting with MPs and sharing the story. We had a couple of medical patients that joined me, and I think it was very powerful. One gentleman in a wheelchair uses cannabis for chronic pain, and you know, obviously with all the issues that we have with chronic pain and you know, folks dying from opioids, I think, you know, certainly it's the time for government to look at the tax reform on cannabis, especially medical cannabis. And what people can do is talk to their MP. And, you know, that's the biggest thing that everyone in our industry needs to do, from the CEOs all the way to the, you know, frontline staff working as bud tenders, and everybody in between is, you know, really working together to engage with government. And, you know, this has been the most active that I've been in politics. And, you know, I think it's a responsibility that we have because, you know, over 150 years of Canadian history, the government's never, you know, dropped the taxes, you know, just because they're nice, right? I mean, it's gonna take a big effort, and you know, certainly, you know, it starts with education.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as Rob's taking that call, here's a little plug for anybody else that's involved in the industry that is feeling the crunch of the taxes. Reach out to us here at Mr. Taxes to do some strategizing on planning to reduce that tax bill through different kind of.
Yeah, Paul, you weren't far off. 1917, the first Income Tax Act. I got original copies up on the wall. When we moved in here, all of these copies here on the wall going back to 1917.
Wow.
And it started out as what, 40 pages, and now it's like 3,000. They don't even put it in books anymore. It's too big. It's like 2 volumes. When they split for those old enough to remember the white pages, when they split it into 2 books, the white pages and the yellow pages, because it got too big. That's our Income Tax Act. And you know it's big when you search for something in the Income Tax Act online, it takes like 10 seconds to find it. Scrolling through all those pages. So it's just too much government intervention, man, in every industry, including yours. And so is there any petition, anything on your site, anything that you started or lobbied with your competitors to get together and lobby a petition where somebody could get on and sign?
Yeah, I mean, we've been active through the coalition C3, which is the industry association and of Canadian producers, and certainly would love any support from consumers, from the public, and I think it's a multi-year effort, right? To be able to get taxed fairly. We're taxed 6 times. Excise taxes for cannabis is 6 times what alcohol is. And obviously that's creates many challenges, but it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to be a big effort from across the country with local MPs, and that's where it always starts, right? It starts with getting enough critical mass from local MPs right across the country.
Yeah. Well, Rob, time to run for politics here, bud.
No, I'd have to take a pay cut and move into a smaller house.
Yeah.
They John Cunningham tried to get me to run for the Conservative Party at BC years ago. Our first office, Paul, was actually in Langley on Douglas Crescent beside the old Home Hardware. You probably remember that spot. We bought an old mailbox center. That was our first tax office. And John Cummings, the provincial Conservative, he was running in the election. His party didn't win a seat. He didn't even win one himself. They didn't win any seats in the election, and their office was right next door. And I talked to him every morning because they would come over and collect the mail that was dropped off at our office. And he said, "You ever think about running for politics?" And I gave him that quote. It's from Johnny Carson, right? Because one of the presidents asked Johnny Carson if he ever wanted to run. He said, "No, I'd have to move into a smaller house and take a pay cut." And he laughed. So yeah. No, I'm not running for politics, but any support we can give you, put something out in our newsletter. We'll make sure and get all the links for the petition in the links below, and we'll get something out in our newsletter. Maybe get a couple quotes from you and proof it, and we'll send it out. See what we can do.
Sounds great. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Anything else that you want to kind of mention or
book? We got to get the book, Quinton. The book.
A book.
Yeah. Was there a book that kind of impacted you as an entrepreneur? You've been in this game for a long time. Something that's kind of really sparked a big transition for you.
I think one of my favorite books, Good to Great, kind of a business book there. But as far as entrepreneurial books, there was a book. It's about 20 years old. Pat Croce, one of the original owners of the Philadelphia 76ers, he wrote a fantastic book on kind of his journey on startups, and then obviously owning his hometown team. And I think lots of great life lessons for entrepreneurs in there.
Right. Speaking of that startup, do you remember how much like seed money you had to kind of launch everything? Any idea what it took to kind of get because I'm sure there's licenses and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, look, with Nextleaf, we raised $20 million over 5 years.
Wow.
It was really the first million we raised in 2017, and that was kind of to get us going. But it was a lot with starting up a facility and building an extraction, purification, oil refinery at a scale that no one's ever done before, and really kind of lock in a competitive advantage. I mean, it cost millions of dollars to build that facility, which took us years to get licensed. But
have you partaken in the SRED development credits from the government on the facilities?
Yeah, we did some shred, and we were lucky with SDTC and
nice,
and some R&D work that we did with hops and hemp in the early days, and developing technology and trying to, more importantly, really develop a competitive advantage here in BC that our industry, whether it's growers and brands, can leverage low cost oil and cannabinoid ingredients.
I mentioned that because it's probably an uphill battle to get those shred credits approved, being a new industry and being in the marijuana industry, like uphill battle at every step.
Yep.
Hats off to you, man, for persevering and keeping it going. And it looks like you're maintaining your health and just not going totally crazy yet. It's every business is an uphill battle, and we hear of all the challenges, but I can only imagine what it is in your industry.
Yeah, no, thank you. You're just trying to keep a sane head and just keep moving forward, right? Looking to the future.
Yeah, I heard Simon Sinek said something about the long game, the infinite game. Your challengers are trying to outdo you, and you're trying to do the best for your customers. If you're looking out for your competitors, you're not growing. If you're looking out for the best thing for the consumer, and it sounds like that's what you guys are doing with all these revolutionary products.
Well, and I think what is interesting about cannabis, it isn't just this overtaxed, overregulated. it's also a David and Goliath kind of battle with kind of, small companies with, craft growers against big tobacco and big alcohol funded companies, whether it's Constellation Brands, British American Tobacco, Altria Tobacco, Imperial Brands. These guys have all invested billions into Canada, into the Canadian industry. And, I think how companies succeed is, like you just said it, thinking about delighting the customer. How do you push out costs out of your production? And how do you pass those savings along to the customer and, keep that quality high? And that's what they care about. And I think
That should be your new tagline, keeping the quality high.
Yeah.
That's a good
Keeping
one.
the quality high. Yeah, I like that one. Okay, awesome chatting, man. Lifting the lid on the business and the industry without letting out your proprietary secrets. Thanks for sharing the books. We'll get those in the comments below. It's 2 inspiring books. The second one I didn't hear about, but I marked down the name. Quinton's a big basketball fan and former star himself. So being 6'7", I'm sure he's going to read that book. But the 76ers, I got to meet Dr. J, Julius Erving, when I was 18. I'm 58 now, so this is 40 years ago. I was working in Ottawa. Real quick story before we end. Dr. J was supposed to be speaking in Ottawa at the retirement convention for the retiring Canadian coach. So I'm sure they hired him to come in, and he wasn't on his flight. The people came back and said he wasn't on his flight. This is way before cell phones. He wasn't on his flight. Nobody's seen him. Anybody seen Dr. J? Not a hard guy to miss, right? In Ottawa, like 6'5" black dude. And then I was working as a doorman at the hotel, and everybody said, keep an eye out for him. If anybody sees him, let us know. He's supposed to be up speaking at the convention. This yellow checkered cab comes pulling in along the driveway, Colonel By Drive in Ottawa, into the parkade there at the hotel. And he jumps out of the car, and the first guy he sees is me. He says, hey, son. He goes, my name's Julius Erving. They call me Dr. J. I'm like, yeah, like I didn't know that, And he says, I'm supposed to be speaking at this convention. My bags are in the back. He said, can you take care of them? And where's the convention? And a buddy of mine was working with me, Eric, was a big fan, hustled him up to the convention. And he came down after and gave me $100 tip, gave Eric $100 tip. And apparently he missed his connecting flight in Syracuse, which I think is a 7-hour drive from Ottawa. And he hired the cab, paid cash to make sure he was there on time to make his speech, like the commitment, right? And he was a 76er.
Yeah, that's great.
So yeah, the commitment, that's what got you to where you are, is the commitment. And let's keep it going. Let's see what we can do to support you guys. And I'll let Quinton finish it off.
Yeah, I mean, it's obvious. I was going to say, you're talking about all like the stress and challenges, but you're a great testimonial for your brand because it looks like it's helped you relax and stay healthy and young. So there's a little
yeah, there you go.
The testimonial results right there.
CBD.
Yeah.
That's the secret.
Yeah. No, actually, my mother, I had her on some CBD when she was going through a hip arthritis, actually, back in the day. So that stuff definitely works. So yeah, man, I appreciate you taking the time here. Great story. Congrats on all the success. And I have a feeling this is just the beginning for you, and sky's the limit. So keep on doing what you're doing, growing, developing, and launching. So yeah, if there's anything we can do to help, especially on the tax side, people are getting pinched everywhere. So happy to help for sure.
Yeah, appreciate that. Thanks for letting me share their story, guys. And
yeah.
That's a wrap for the Side Hustle this week with Paul Pederson and Glacial Gold, keeping the quality high. That's your new public paid service announcement here from the Side Hustle. See you guys on the next show.